I invite you guys to look at the models, to look at the drawing by using the mouse thing, and you kind of can stand up and use the mouse. I made that mouse pad just for you guys. In the meantime, if you guys would like to start talking, you can start talking, or we can try, and I can quickly just show you another, like the demonstration of how it works. Or what do you guys think? Do you want me to spend like 5 minutes trying?
It's 3:20.
Okay. I'll try it out, but
Yeah, let's
yeah.
demo.
Oh, I need the mouse. That comes a little later.
What did you say about option?
So this should work. For this particular instance, let's say I give it a different kind of volume rather than a rectilinear. So rather than just an extruded box, right? If I turn this on. So what's going on right now is using the information that are sort of attached to these points, it's trying to find an optimal sort of relaxation where all the adjacencies are taken into account, the bounding box is taken into account, entry, all these sort of things. It arranges each one of those points represent like a data value, like living room, bathroom, kitchen, etc. So once that data is then fed into the rest of the portion of the script, what it does is it generates a geometry. So you can see that the volume, it had like a sloping side here, which made the sort of sloping side that had a direct impact on the outcome of the result. And this is sort of the second level of engagement, the level of engagement that Jessica and David used to design their more specific versions that could plug into a site that they had. So yeah, that's all I wanted to show.
Can you speak about the shown? Correlation between, let's say, bedroom that does not need much or whatever, that makes some sense because it seems to be, must be using a lot of precedents and pre-interpreted language. Most to parse these words, because the words are charged, you would ask 1,000 people what bedroom is, so people get more answers than people.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering how you make this look at
Well, so right now, there's nothing in the rooms, so there's no furniture. It just makes kind kind of like an axon. I mean, it makes a 3D model. This is in 3D, but I was kind of interested in displaying this as making a nice little axonometric drawing that showed variation. So the rooms just have the text identifier. They don't represent anything else. The only thing that what you end up calling the room represents is just like a label, so the name of the variable, right? So the name of that room gets assigned the name that you give it, the text that you give it. And there's a portion of the online form that asks whether or not you want that room to be private. And so it says, and that portion of the script only deals with interior walls. So if you want the room to be visible from other rooms, you type in a yes, like a Y for yes, and what it does is it doesn't generate interior walls around that room. And if you want the room to be private, or if you want it to have interior walls or not be seen from other rooms, you give it a no, and then it gives you walls, interior walls in those ones. So the idea is that even though they may be charged, the adjacencies that sort of charge them is what I'm capitalizing on, right? So you might have a given understanding about what a kitchen is, like what kind of plumbing or what kind of light it needs to receive. But right now, all this takes into account are what other rooms it needs to be connected to. So if you decided that the kitchen needed to be connected to the living room, it would do that for you.
I don't understand very well, yes, sorry, because I am an architect that like to draw, and also that I believe that the schools of architecture have to show how to draw. So I'm sorry because I'm very old and very conservative. But I don't understand clearly your thesis. The thesis is that you are offering a kind of program with that apparently depending just only on the program, depending on the rooms, just some very specific renouncing, of course, to the idea of the context, to the idea of the culture, to the idea of the even the economical conditions, to the idea of the society that is surrounding us, to renouncing to all of these features that, in my opinion, make the architecture that's something more than just only working with levels. You are proposing a kind of levels where a client can go to this program and they can put together and say, okay, this is my house, I buy it. But this is very old. This was made in the 60s.
Right.
In another system. So, I mean, we were speaking about, we want to figure a kind of contemporary attitude, modern attitude or something. This is old. This was, so I prefer to speak about this model. I prefer to speak, to imagine that this model is a wonderful beach because it's very nice, and that you are looking at wonderful views on the sea, and just because here you have a mountain behind it, and just because you have studied the structure, and you have enjoying about the light during the your nap after having a wonderful time. So what I'm telling is that if you want to impact me, you have not voted because I mean this was done. It's a kind of aspiration that is coming from the modernity. So the most modern architects that you believe that are very old architects, the architects of the modernity, aspire to do this. Not with the computer, but was in some way was their aspiration. And at the end, this was a failure. Because you know what happened, that unfortunately people have feelings, and people have things coming from, I don't know, the name if this is Puri, or yes, and people have a culture, and there was a context, and when there was a wonderful almond tree, yes, towards the north, the people wanted to be open towards the north, because although it was very cold, they could see during the spring this wonderful tree. So this exploration was the exploration of the reason, yes, only the reason, and was a failure.
I understand.
Which was a real failure. And now, do you understand what I mean?
If I may.
So it's very old, this discussion and this research.
If I may, can I
I need to feel architecture.
interrupt? fight for architecture. I love that. That's what makes, sorry, let me respond to what he said. So this is just the start, or just a tool. The idea is about more than just a tool. It's about a design methodology. This is about making architecture the way computer programmers make computer programs. It's about making architecture the way musicians today make music. It's about a collaborative effort that allows people to take code or take logic systems, take ideas about architecture, plug them into their tool, to this sort of environment that lets them build off of each other. So I'm not trying to I'm not saying that you should go and build these houses right now. What I'm saying is that you should try and use this tool and see if you can design something that has some aspiration about a house that is on a beautiful beach, that gets, you know, a nice breeze during the summertime or in the spring or whatever. Use this tool to design that, and then use the components or use the logic systems that engineers, consultants, people all around the world might develop in order to develop your plumbing, or in order to develop your structure, or an idea about entry into your home. Share, collaborate, and then when you're done making that house that you've made, share it online and let people see it, get them excited about it, and then hopefully you can make a version that is adaptable, that other people can make themselves, so that they can say, hey, like I want your kind of house, but I want it with 3 bedrooms.
So Nick, there's one thing you're forgetting. All of these people that have spent 5 years being in architecture, they know that the built environment in this country is built by less than 2% by architects,
Yeah.
and that houses are probably a much less percentage than that.
That's kind of like the sad
It's very
nature
sad.
of this. And the way I came to terms with that was that hopefully these tools will allow, I mean, okay, let's say a developer wants to
The
develop.
developers already have these tools.
Right, so let's say a
Home
developer
Brothers have
wants
these
to,
tools like ad infinitum.
yeah, they do, but they still make suburban tract houses that all look the same. My one, you know, I really like Paris as a city, right? Paris is
I
a great
agree,
city.
it's the best city.
Yeah, so it's, you know, and I've tried so many times to think about what I like about Paris, and I really, really like the fact that it's all uniform. It's uniform, but it has these little moments of differentiation where each house might have, you know, like a different width, right? Or the corners will have these little towers that come out and sort of accentuate that, but then they're all made of the same material, they're all made in the same kind of proportions, and that's what's so beautiful about Paris. And these developers are missing out on that opportunity. These developers are missing out on an opportunity because instead of designing, you know, I would argue that they don't have these skills because they still end up designing houses that are all the same, that have the same
But they
kind of
do-
number.
they do marketing things to the people that tell them what they want and they use those feedback, et cetera.
Right, but I really think that if it were easy and if it were quick and cheap to design houses that people could design, or to design just differentiation in between these suburban tracts, we'd have suburban communities that all looked kind of, you know, that had different houses in them, which is what I want, you know, I don't want, but that's like,
It's not about the house.
yeah, well,
One question that I would like to say,
yeah,
I want to interject for a moment because I think that if the question becomes open source code versus conservative architectural arguments, we're losing the punch of this, what this thesis can be. It's not about defending either our kind of normative notion of tectonics and our love for tectonics starts from modernism, as you mentioned, participatory design in the 50s. So it comes way before the advent of computer software. And I understand, on the other hand, that there's something really important to be said about how our culture is being reconstrued through big data. Because, you know, when you go to Netflix and you put your preferences, what you like is not a matter of value or decision or ethics or aesthetics, but it's a kind of instrumental and incremental compilation of your series of choices, right? So there's something really valuable to be discovered within that framework of how our personal values, our ethics, are getting reconstructed through the type of media that have become so pervasive in our lives. However, the way that you are arguing for your project is missing the strategy which can become instrumental about what this thing can do. It's not just about anybody can log in and do a house and, you know, this is what modernism wanted with participatory design. And it's a legacy that migrates from time to time with different types of medium. You know how many people tried to kill this discipline? A lot of them, and Kukas was one of them, with editorial authorship. Like, he declared himself as an editor versus an author several times. And a lot of famous architects have done that, including Le Corbusier. So it's a very complex question that you're tackling. And it's not just about open source and getting Linus Torvalds and Linux games into architectural production. We can get into strategies like you're using a grid, which becomes ubiquitous. You're using a route, which repeats itself, right? You have certain tools that reiterate themselves through this vast matrix that you have. And so the question is, how you strategize and how you understand the specific dissolution of authorship in a discipline in a given moment in time and become specific.
Well, I'm sorry, for 1 minute, for completing this reflection. I mean, the question of the author is not the question of an architect that is the author. The question of the author has to do with something that is not rational. And the question is that you can't reduce architecture just to only the rational act. There are some, I know that it's very risky speaking about this. I absolutely against this architect that announced the end of the architecture. I believe in the architecture. I think that is necessary making better cities. I defend the idea of architecture linked to the service, but the service is much more than servility. You have to give more than the society probably claim. I agree with all of this, but the question is that there are parts of the architecture that has to do, I don't know, you can call intuition, you can call, I don't know, a synthetic knowledge, in contrary of this descriptive knowledge, that for me it's very difficult pronouncing to ideas of culture, context, industry that is providing the different systems for producing, even now that we are, because apparently, I mean, your proposal is interesting. I think that is quite old, but that this is quite attractive, the idea of following discussing with this. And also, one thing that is very, I think that we have to sense, this is quite optimistic in many different ways. So you are young, you are very optimistic, so that's is the time, you know, is the time, yes, for thinking about this question. So I think that is a good time. But think about all of these elements that constitute architecture. One of the problems of the architecture of nowadays, there is no difference in between this attitude and the other attitude of many, I don't know, corporation architects that are invading the world with the same towers anywhere without being aware that something different is in each area. It's an opinion, of course, we can discuss about this. What I appreciate of this meeting here is that we are discussing and these subjects that are interesting. But there is not, at the end, there is not difference in between this and what is happening with this commercialization of architecture without any sense. So I appreciate what you are trying to speak about, the question of how to produce cheaper, even providing just the people with the possibility of organizing their own aspirations. Yes, so it's a quite attractive target. But I think that it's even attractive analyzing the history and even the recent history for seeing what is happening when we are trying to reduce this. So I wish we could find a system for providing just the people with this kind of rational elements of knowledge that precisely allows them to solve at least something as basic and something as important as the housing. But I think that in the way always happen that just only the rational elements are not enough for solving the issue.
I'd like to go back to the music comparison you made actually in the beginning. I think it's a good starting point, an interesting starting point, but I would challenge it with sort of not capturing everything about the sort of comparison, especially the performative aspect. The orchestra performing a piece is a temporary thing, right? The piece is performed and interpreted and it's in there, out there in the world, and disappears and it's gone. The next orchestra doing the same will also leave no trace. You have the recording, maybe like the photography, which is an interesting equivalent, like you can basically make a recording again of whatever has been built. So I feel that, I mean, the architecture has also that other performativity that's actually the structure itself. Right? It actually exists out there and it performs every day, again, over and over, but in different conditions, daylight, temperature, how inhabitants actually use it and interpret it yet again. So I think there's an important physical secondary layer to it, right? Which changes a lot of things, right? Because it's also very material and very non-changing. Right? So sampling, in a sense, with that new chopping off the facade, right? You're bringing it up to another building, which isn't just a digital process. Right? So I think I'd like to get to a more precise discussion of the actual sampling part and also what to present as a black box, basically, is how the design is created. Right? We haven't seen anything about what the assumptions are underlying and how the sharing happens. Right? So far, it's been operating mostly on the artifact. Right?
You brought up a really good point. So
that'd be great.
let me just show you what's going on. And I know this is like, you know, for people who do things like this is a big no-no. Never show your sort of script. But I made it really neat. So this thing has been divided up into areas that sort of allow for points of entry, right? So this component right here represents the bounding volume that you can plug in. And this component right here represents the part that sort of runs the packing simulation that figures out circulation. Once those points are sort of developed and put into the correct positions, there are other pieces here that create the different elements of the house, right? So this part right here elaborates on circulation. This creates rudimentary plans. This one creates an exterior boundary, and so on. So an enclosure envelope, horizontal surfaces, these part, so structure, openings. I tried to compose this thing so that each little component was taking care of a specific part of the architectonics of the house, and so that it was kind of easy for you to go in here and identify, okay, I know exactly what this one is doing. It's taking this bounding area, or this volume that the first part of the script produced, and then it's giving me the roof, for instance. And so the idea is that if you wanted to, if you so desired, you can switch out the part that makes the roof part for a part that you wrote yourself, or a part that you found online, and you just plugged in here. So kind of in response to what you're talking about in terms of how the sampling works, or how the remixing, those things work, it's almost as if someone put up a beat online, and you really like that beat, but you wanted to put it with vocals from a different artist. And so you could take someone's script that does roof structure and someone's script that does openings, and you can combine them to make your own version of the house. So that's where I was going with the music analogy.
Yeah, the thing you need to do in order to make this really work is design each element, each component, the actual structural aspects of it, the material aspects, everything about that aspect of it, and plug it into this same system so that you come out with a product that can built, can be costed, can be done, everything when it comes out the other end of that too.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of work.
I mean, that, yeah, and the funny thing is that that work is sort of compounded, right? So if you were able to do that in the span of a semester, if you,
I've done it, we just didn't have the computer working at that stage.
Right.
And I kind of,
right, and that's what Richard Meyer does, right? So Meyer designs a house, and then he has his interns. He has this sort of set of,
I suspect him.
yeah, he has this set of details.
That he did this.
Right, he has a set of details or certain moves that you know, he's got a regulating grid that controls everything, right? But so they can produce these houses to an extent using the same kind of material logic, the same kind of tectonics, the same kind of details, right? It's like architects in offices today that reuse door schedules, right? It's the same.
but basically, designing each one of those components that can make an infinite variety of houses. You have to have a beam, you have to have a column, you have to have a panel, you have to have a window, you have to have several windows, you have to have all those things designed and plugged into it, so you're not making it in a chipboard house. So you're making a real house. And, you know, I put a roll form sheet metal building in the Whitney Museum one night in the middle of the night that was designed very much in the way you're doing it. And you could make an infinite variety of houses from it. So I'm behind you, but you're not really doing away with the architect. You're creating another aspect of architecture.
Yeah, that's exactly what.
Well, and I'll just interject. Unfortunately, the discussion has been focused for the most part on the output, and that's not the crux of the thesis, right? The potent part of the thesis for me is the fact that we're proposing an elastic interface that multiple people can contribute to, that it can evolve over time and answer to some of the conditions that we're doing necessary. But it's not about creating a perfect tool that's just a contemporary version of the Sears Roebuck catalog, right? I mean, that's not what the thesis is. And you waver and it's confusing.
Well,
You would
yeah.
still have to have the elements.
Right, so,
Yeah.
that's the thing, I mean, in order to be up here and even have this discussion and present it, you know, I had a semester to do this, so I'm pretty impressed with it. I mean, I'll reserve judgment for you guys, but, you know, I got a great response out of it from all the people I sent it to, and I think it's really nice when they,
We got
That's the brilliance of it, right? The fact that it has the potential to evolve and become, you know, much more complex. The fact that you were taking the risk in engaging a new dialogue with the design and making it. And I think that's where the real potential is.
But I think to that regard, I still hold up my challenge or question. Like, listen to the sample music piece on that night. I'm saying this is a great tune, I like that. I take it with me, I listen to it on my ride to work or whatever. It's not the same to looking at an axionometric screenshot of the structure. Because the performance of the architecture is to inhabit it, right? So you need to live within it, to use it. Right? So I think I uphold that. Right? The performance of the piece of architecture is not its representation, right? But it's actually its performance, meaning using it. Right? So I would challenge that you, like, in a sense, missing, and I'm not complaining because I know the framework, etc. But I think it's a crucial thing to find a new representation that speaks to the performance of the structure as a space, which is manifold, right? It goes beyond drawing it in a field. That's the biggest critique I would have. You're actually falling back into the drawing as evaluation, right? So you say overcoming drawing, but you're reinforcing it in a sense, because the only option of evaluating you give is a simulated drawing which still operates in the same dynamics.
ideally, this tool has the potential to get plugged into a digital ecosystem that has other tools that allow you to experience buildings virtually. So if they're 3D models, they're not too far off from being able to have like a virtual walkthrough or something that allows you to experience these buildings in a way that isn't just these axonometric drawings that are very stylized, very sort of presented in this way. The reason for the stylizing of the axonometric drawings is kind of just an ode to actually Peter Eisman, but that's like another story in and of itself. Because, you know, I see this as kind of like an autonomous process. But, so, you know, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I don't think buildings should be distilled to axonometric drawings. I think they are made to exist in and to walk through them. I see this as being able to very quickly and easily get to the point where you can make, you can simulate what it's like to walk into a building, and make judgments based on those simulations, rather than judgments based on examination drawings.
But maybe you have to engage the existing world also, right? Because if an architecture exists, right, your samples exist out in the world, right? And not this tool necessary, but what if you could actually record and have people have moments of appreciation in the world, right?
Yeah.
So take actually a shot of a build structure with the GPS coordinates. Right? If you stand here, this is what I mean with beauty, right?
Yeah.
Or this is what I mean with like a elaborate glass space, right? And then this is basically the start of the sample, right? Where you capture qualities, right? Not geometries. Right?
Yeah.
You're trying to capture qualities and sort of sensations and like holistic, basically effects, so to say, that are out there in the world, right? And people can start to sample, saying, this is the quality I'm looking for, right? The system's role is to actually recreate them within the parameters and constraints that are available, let's say, right? But not coming necessarily from, I think, the confusion of the componentry assemblage, right? Assuming that the qualities that which comes from the some metaphor, whereas actually the performance of architecture is the experience state of the built structure, right? Which of course you can simulate in real time, right? But I think you have to bring that in as something that also, if it's for the everyday user, right? People can connect to and can record and contribute to, right? So you have 10,000 places in the world, right? To start from, where people actually build up a catalog of those very known trains and perceptive qualities that they can put their fingers on.
Well, I think in order to do that, we would have to start with a catalog of these buildings. And,
But
like,
you have to start with a catalog of the elements you make those buildings from.
well, not necessarily.
To make it a reality.
I mean, the
you
elements
do.
can be anything.
To make it a reality, you do. Because otherwise the things that come out that you design are not going to be built.
But you know, I just like to go back to Jim's point, using the teacher semester with Jim said, it's not about the house. And I mean, I think one of the important things about your project is it's a tool, but it's a tool that has the capacity to create a kind of larger field in which, you know, structural engineer, a landscape architect, a dancer, a musician can come together and engage in a dialogue. And it's not necessarily about production bounds, but again, how they work, how they interact with each other, how they resist each other as well. So I think the tool is also creating that kind of space for a variety of ways. We talked about it in terms of a dinner party, where it may be a routine conversation, it may be, you know, much more violent. So I mean, I think of this not just in terms of producing a house, but producing a kind of space, and all that I think is an important implications for the way you teach.
I think we can go back to the interface, which is really where these different people can have that dialogue. Right? As I mean, this came up a few weeks ago. The interface is, it still is black box that's represented.
It's a black box to people who don't use Grasshopper. And this is kind of like an unfortunate thing, but I guess part of
But
my,
Nick, it's also your job to
yeah.
present it,
Yeah.
right? It's not very effective to just show the definition.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I said this is like a big meta, but it didn't come across. But no, I mean, I completely agree with you, Mark. And my kind of end-all aspiration would have been to be able to clearly and effectively communicate how this thing goes through this process, these steps, and so that someone can understand it and someone can actually change those steps. I'm kind of telling you that it's possible. It just takes a little bit of
It's absolutely possible.
yeah.
I'm sure we're coming to the end here, but my questions that are lingering in my head have to do with the role of Grayson in this process. I mean, in order to get on board with this exciting project, it seems like we have to believe that the maximum number of likes on Facebook is the way that we should be. And I wonder if you think that really, or not.
I mean,
Can we
this
get beyond Facebook?
this project is in a way, it's a little bit of a critique or criticism of how these companies have encroached on other industries and how they've sort of completely, you know, for Netflix being a big example, right? But they've completely destroyed
But I
film
guess what I'm
criticism.
getting at, are you trying to instill more design intelligence into the layperson, or are you trying to give the layperson the ability to design? I think
Well,
those are two pretty different things.
I don't think they're different
Neither
things.
one.
I think they're the same. I think that by allowing people to design buildings and not just, you know, cookie cutter suburban houses, but other kinds of buildings, you bring people into the conversation. You open the doors to people who aren't studying architecture, and then
But are you sure about the word design? I mean, could it be substituted with the word draft?
I don't see a distinction. What do you
You
mean?
don't think the distinction between drafting and design?
See, the thing that is missing is the vocabulary of architecture. And right now, the vocabulary of architecture of individual architects doesn't really exist. Where people like Scarpa, Alto, Corbusier, etc., have a vocabulary of architecture that they've used their whole life, and they built with that vocabulary, and you could tell who they were if you saw them building it. Now there's no vocabulary, it's kind of anything goes. And because the identity of architecture has gotten so wound down, so to speak, that stylistic condition of vocabulary doesn't exist. I'd like to talk to.
No, we need to.
Unfortunately,